Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, we're just going to spend more time on questions. This week is all Q&A. So if you've got questions, this is a great week. This is a great panel. We've got a lot of great people available here. So go ahead and ask those questions in Mukana. Of course, you can get the link to that in the emails that go out. If you ask on Discord, those types of things. And you can ask your questions there and vote on those questions. If you aren't in Mukana, you can also use askofficehours.global. That's this little QR code right here. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask those questions any time of the day. So we reset the Mukana every day, but you can put your questions in 24/7, and then we'll feed them into the system. So go ahead and throw those questions into there or jump into the system itself. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Hasma Gajar, our friend in Cape Town, South Africa, has our first one this morning. Yesterday, this was just a part of my first question, which did not get a response, so here it is. When in office hours, when a producer question requires feedback or follow-up after the show, how should the community provide this feedback or follow-up?
Go ahead, Guy.
I think the best platform that we have for this is Discord. Even though it's not public, it is a repository that's persistent versus just putting it in chat, because chat's not persistent. It goes away at the end of the day. So I would say to put it in Discord, and maybe if you can, also put it as a question, let the community vote with a link to the Discord. So let the community bring it up to the show. So if it gets upvoted to like 20 votes, then it's definitely popping back in the show. We'll follow up. So that's probably the best recommendation that I can come up with.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, just in general, it amazes me that we do this every day and that we are allowed to follow up and kind of come back to topics and redo them. I will say that it caused me to think about RFI, Room for Improvement, which is one of our Discord things where you can literally talk about what the show does and what happens. And it reminds me of the postmortems we always do in production. If you can ever have a chance after a show happens to sit down with everybody right afterwards in the moment and talk about the things that were good and the things that were less than good. It is one of the most powerful ways to increment and improve things that I have ever run across. So, thank you Hasmik, for giving us the reminder that coming back and getting a follow-up is sometimes the most powerful learning process.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Ironically, Hasmik was on After Hours yesterday, and we discussed this very question. And the recommendation was After Hours because we were there and we were talking about it, and Event Chat, which is the one with the embedded video in it.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one more thing. In the Discord, if you look in the top right, there's a search, and you can actually say search by date after. And so what I'll do is I'll go back 2 days, and then I'll search through just the threads and see what's updated. That way I'm not missing things. I can actually look at what I want to look at. The other thing is by getting Nitro, if you solve something and you want us to show it, like say it's screen activity, if you get Nitro, you can get, I think it's 50 megabyte uploads. So it's way bigger than the regular size ones. And that way you can actually share the solve, and then we can maybe put it up as an actual playback during the show.
Yeah, and I think that for longer discussions, if you're really trying to figure something out, I think that After Hours is probably the best place to go. Is to and what I do when I've done it in the past is I'll schedule time in After Hours. I'll say, hey, Charles, I'm trying to figure something out, or with someone, or Chris, or whatever. Let's jump into After Hours together at this time. And that way, if anyone else wants to learn from that, they can. So it's not just us having a Zoom together. You can jump into After Hours and go through something. And I think that that's good for a lot of people. Sometimes if I'm going to do that, you'll see me post in Discord as an announcement, like, hey, we're going in here. And you'll see those. There is a After Hours, announce alert, an AH alert that you want to kind of keep track of, because when something's happening, oftentimes someone will throw an alert in there that, like, hey, someone's, Morpheus and Neo are fighting, Morpheus is fighting Neo, and people can run in there and see what's going on. So anyway, that's another thing to think about. The Discord's good. Problem is it's mostly text based, and it can just take a long time to talk through something that you might have taken 10 minutes just to sit and look at it and look at screens and figure out. So I don't think I think Discord is great for talking through ideas. But sometimes if you're trying to figure something out, it can take a long time to do that in text. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it'd be amazing if somebody would just distill down what was found out during those after-hours long discussions, because some of us work during the day and we can't just hang out there listening. But it would be nice if there was just the follow-up, condensed down. There are things. How do new viewers find the Discord? Before we used to announce it every morning before the show, and
it's in the email.
I don't even know how.
Now it's easy. You can the link to to joining Discord is in the email. So if you go to officehours.global, it's a good question. Thank you. Go to officehours.global. You can join, and if you join, you'll start getting emails from us. And once you get those emails, at the bottom of those emails is a way to join Discord. And there's about 2,000 of us, or over 2,000 of us that are in there chit-chatting. So the one thing I will say is that with Discord, I've learned to just every Sunday I just reset it. Like I just say, mark the whole channel as red. Like I got through as much as I'm going to get through. Otherwise, for me, it became overwhelming. There's so many people and there's so many threads that I just wasn't able to know exactly which way was up. So I just found it easier just to reset it every week and capture what I can. Next question.
Tim Mann in Melbourne, Australia is up next. Recommendations for long-distance HDMI. And he's talking 30 to 50 meters over Cat5e with converters that will work with Mac OS.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Now, I haven't used this particular one yet, but I have used this type before, and it doesn't require software. Monoprice has these Blackbirds HD-based-T extenders. They convert HDMI to HD-based-T and send it over a private. This doesn't go into a regular network, but it'll go over Cat5 or Cat6 up to, this one says up to 70 meters. That's for 1080p. It will send 4K up to 30 meters, I think. And that's pretty cheap for a pair of them. So $70 for a pair. That's one of your cheapest ways out. It also sends, it can send power and infrared and even Ethernet over that same Cat6 if you need to send all of those things to a monitor on the other end. And it does support HDCP 2.2, so you won't get it blacked out if you're trying to send a copyrighted material and you've got a monitor on the other end that complies. It won't black you out like some will.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I'm waiting for Blackmagic to come out with the HDMI to Ethernet as opposed to SDI. But if you want to do SDI, you can go pretty far too.
Yeah, at 30 to 50 meters, oftentimes I go to SDI just because it's simple and relatively inexpensive. I buy SDI by rolls of 1,000 and then terminate them as needed. So the cost of that SDI cable is very low for me. And so that's the easy thing for me to do. And if it gets cut, I don't really, I just cut shorter cables out of it later. That's why I've not used a lot. There are some, I think Guy will probably recommend some HDMI cables, which are great, that are all in one. I have very successfully, Geffen and a couple other people make the over Cat5e, 5e. I have successfully run at about 250 feet without any trouble, but it always worries me. Like that's not going to be, I would never use that in production. I use it for internal stuff that I'm passing around. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this is one of those you get what you pay for things where the one that we found that works rock solid, it's expensive, but the brand that we love is Hall Technologies. So the exact model is the UH-BT-S, and I'll put a link to it in the chat. But be aware of the inexpensive ones that they may not work consistently.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And one thing not to overlook is that the HD-based T is one of the only solutions that sends power as well, up to 75 watts of AC over the same cable. Sounds a bit dangerous, but that way you can put a monitor remotely and not have to worry about running power to it, which is great.
And in high-end productions, just so you know that it exists, ISHE is the company that does KVMs and long-distance traversals, and in most major trucks and events and so on and so forth that we work on. That's what we see. They're very highly configurable and very expensive. Next question.
Simon Ray in Midlands in the UK. Can you route audio from the browser through a MixPre with NoiseAssist and back through the computer so that you can comfortably listen to podcasts and videos from less experienced producers without being annoyed by their high noise floor?
Go ahead, Chris.
So, Simon, this is an interesting signal path that you're describing here, because based on what you've written, it makes it sound like you're listening to the computer, because you say through the noise assist back to the computer, you should probably plug your headphones into the MixPre. That's the first thing I'm going to say. You should probably monitor at the MixPre. Now, what you're talking about here is super interesting, because typically, like I have the noise assist plug-in, and I just use it on my mic because I'm in a noisy room that you don't want to listen to, or I don't want to make you listen to it. Maybe you do want to listen to it. I don't know. But with the latest updates in the Sound Devices universe, you can get a second instance of noise assist. So what you're saying is quite interesting. But what you'd actually do is you bring the noise from your computer, because you're going to be, it sounds like you're on a call with somebody or a router, whatever. Whatever noise coming from your computer would come in on a channel. You'd have to do it mono like Alex does, because he likes the world in mono. And then you'd put the second instance of noise assist on that channel. It's an interesting idea if you're just annoyed at listening to everybody else's bad audio. But you're only going to listen to it at the MixPre. I think that would work. It's an interesting idea, but there is a little confused, or at least I'm a little confused about the exact signal path that you're outlining in the question.
Go, Bill.
I use the similar thing from Cedar, going through my Universal Audio Apollo Solo, and it is designed to do real-time noise reduction. My concern about putting it on a feed that's coming down the internet is you never know what the noise profile is going to be. It's going to try its best, but some users in a grid like ours will have quiet signals. Others will have more background noise, so it's going to have to constantly adapt to it. In the case of the Cedar that I use every day here, it takes about 3 to 5 seconds for it to figure out what is noise and what is my voice, and then suddenly the noise behind my voice disappears. It's using a DSP in a box and an external thing to make that real time without any processor load whatsoever. So I find that useful if I'm doing something live, but I'm not sure how effective it would be if I presented it with a constantly varying noise floor profile as you would get from an internet feed. It may or may not work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do find that the again, noise assist runs it's a little bit more efficient and it works a little better than Cedar, actually, in my opinion, for this kind of thing. It'll react a little bit faster and a little bit gentler than Cedar is. And I used to own a bunch of Cedar boxes. So I don't know about the plugin, but I had a bunch of Cedar hardware that would do this. I do think you could do it. You could also just dump it into something and have it converted. You could dump it into Logic or something with a denoiser. This is why Dolby Noise Reduction was created, was to get rid of hiss, from tapes and systems and everything else. So you may find some less aggressive solutions to reduce basic noise. But I do think that also putting comments into the podcasts of saying, hey, it'd be really great if you sorted this out, and a little bit of social pressure might people, once they know that people are complaining about it, and get your friends to complain about it all at one time, and you might notice that they'll invest. I will say that I barely listen to NPR now, because I've gotten so used to the show that I can't listen to the phoners. I can't, when they have people call in, I can't listen to that anymore. And I definitely can't listen to Skype in echoey rooms and stuff like that NPR still thinks is okay. And so it just bothers me too much I don't care what they have to say anymore. It's too much of an annoyance. So I hear you. I hear you on that one. Next question.
Next one comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Anything new to be learned from Apple's latest behind-the-scenes shot on iPhone video? And he's got a link there to it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, one new thing to be learned is that Apple will pay you a lot of money to use an inappropriate product to shoot a stop-motion animation. Because I don't think, if you look at I'm not going to play any of it.
I can play it. Hold
okay.
On.
There it is there. But that's some of the behind-the-scenes. They're using tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to mount an iPhone, and they're doing stop motion animation. And stop motion animation is, you're investing weeks, sometimes years of work into that project. And I wouldn't want to have those files disappear in the nameless file system of the iPhone, ways of getting those files on and off and being confident that they're backed up and all that stuff. I would want a camera in there that can now also shovel them off to a server and make 3 copies every time I take a picture. But I'm sure it was a good PR move for Apple to finance that and find somebody that was willing to take the chance and do the stop motion animation on do something that take a long time on an iPhone for the publicity.
I actually think that I think that this will end up being a better solution for most stop motion because the problem you end up with is dealing with the camera. Like I've worked on a bunch of stop motion stuff, and just the camera process, being able to build the mechanics where you have a lot more control over the software eventually, maybe not right now, but I think you could eventually go down that path.
You don't have any choice of lenses.
You do.
Alex.
You do. You can actually put. Yeah, you do have lenses. You don't have a lot of stop motion. This one obviously didn't need that, but I wouldn't do the next Wallace and Gromit with it. But I think that for a lot of people who are trying to produce something a little bit faster, there's a lot of integration in the software that would make it a lot easier. And I don't think. I mean, the file process has been pretty. Because I'm now recording everything. I'm just working on a rig right now to record everything on Drive. So it's just files on a drive. Like you're not putting it into anything. You're just recording to the drive. It's not any different than going to any other digital camera from my perspective. As we look at this, I don't know what this rig is. Like I don't know if anyone else. Like
it's on a rail system. It's a full motion control thing.
Yeah, this is motion.
It's a motion control rig with an upside down head.
This looks like a syrup, but this, and I don't know that for sure, but it looks like a syrup controller, and this could be a syrup rig. That's SYRP. I don't know what this rig that's holding the camera is, though. This doesn't look like a rig that I've seen before.
It looks like I've seen several rigs like that they've built for video assist for holding monitors for directors with receivers.
Yeah, and this may be a transmitter up here. Again, I haven't. Maybe they rigged this up to do it without. It's not a true camera, but you can see it coming through here. There's our guy. So here's and you can start to see. I mean, one of the things that I'm dealing with right now, because I'm kind of playing with this at the moment, is really figuring out. Oh, and this looks like this looks actually like a Moment. Moment, I think, makes a rig that looks like this. From this side, it looks like the Moment rig. Because it has this little bit here. But one of the things we are really thinking about is what is this rig going to look like? We saw a little bit of this with the other one, which is I've got to hold a wireless transmitter, I've got to hold a hard drive, I've got to do a bunch of other things that are going to all come out of that. So that's one thing that we're kind of as we start to get ready to do more of this kind of production. Let's see. And now here you can see. These are the big Moment lenses. So these are the big lenses that they're adding to it. So it's probably a Moment rig just because it's using the Moment lenses. But these are the big lenses. Now, one of the big advantages of using these lenses and not using the iPhone lenses is that you can leave the iPhone lens on 1x the whole time. The sensor on the iPhone 1x is way higher resolution. This is the 48 megapixel sensor. It is not, the other ones are not the same quality. So if you're shooting stuff with your family, you can shoot with the 0.5 or the 5x or whatever. But if you're shooting something that matters, you're going to want to put lenses in front of the 1x lens to make that actually work. So that's let's see here. You can see. This is a pretty typical, this is kind of a 3-axis rig that they have here that lets you rotate it on all those axes. And so you loosen each one of these to be able to get to the axes that are there. Let's see here. Moment lens. Yeah, this, I think I'm going to back up and say, I think this is the whole rig is Moment, I believe, now that we're looking at a better angle. I don't think there's anything new there.
What fascinates me is how autobiographical this turned out to be.
Does anyone know what the software is that they're using? I think is it Dragon?
Yeah, it's called Dragon Capture or something like that.
Yeah.
She mentions it very briefly, but her accent obscures. But it's Dragon.
But Dragon is that's the industry standard for it. See, so we got a kind of an angle here. I don't think there's anything new. We see the larger lens. There's that. So that's a more operative shot. Now, this is an interesting rig here. I don't know exactly what this is. Obviously, this means it's a you have a little bit more control, a very specific control over what you're doing there. So it's a little bit more of a, and then this is that larger lens that we were talking about here. I don't know what this is. So I'm sure it has a reason to be there, but I don't know what the reason is.
Is that a glue gun at the bottom? There's glue dripping off.
Probably.
Where's the glue gun? I don't know where.
Midway down on the right side.
Could be.
Software is called Dragon Frame.
Yeah. Additional software used. There you go. But anyway, with each one of these, I think there was another one that I just saw pop up as well. So there'll be more of these to. I will agree with Courtney that if I was doing a feature film level thing, I probably wouldn't do it. If I was going to do it for Apple with their iPhone, I would absolutely do it. And I think that, but I also think that it could really, by showing that you can do it, you have a bunch of kids and a bunch of other folks going, "Oh, I could do that," and it's that rig is actually a fraction of what we saw with the other ones. And so I think that stop motion is such a great way to teach filmmaking for kids. I mean, they really enjoy it. There's something very, you work really hard at something for a day or two and get something that's really fun to watch. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Alex, I liked what you just said about the encouragement factor, because I have a hard time wrapping my arms around the idea of an iPhone being used as an iCam, I guess is the statement. So is it still a bit of a stunt to modify an iPhone to work like a camera, or is that something that eventually they'll get something more purpose-built?
I don't think you need – I think you can keep on building rigs around it. I don't think you need to – I wouldn't put it out of – the only reason that Apple would ever build a camera, I think, is to solve problems that no one else is solving. So it wouldn't be another camera. I think that the iPhone is the other camera. I think if they have to build something, they have to build it because no one else is building it for a variety of reasons. So but I think that there's a lot of people, when you look at just the mass of things, there are a lot of people that are using iPhones for production. When it comes to YouTube and TikTok and everything else, the mass. There's a center of mass that is, giving them the tools that they need to do that. And you'll look at, I think that you saw this in Final Cut is definitely focusing heavily on making sure that it's easy. Final Cut is one of the most popular editing apps of the creators that I work with. And the saying that they say that's come up a couple of times is, well, I don't get paid by the hour. Like I get paid to get, I have to get this done as fast as I can. And Final Cut's just faster. And so Apple has, the mixture of these two things is pretty powerful. Go ahead, Bill.
So the long form of this piece, not the behind the scenes, is very much in the style of John Lewis ads that have been running in London and throughout the British Isles for many years. They're beloved. They spend the entire year getting ready for this big event, and this feels in tone the same way. The thing that struck me when I finally saw the behind the scenes is that it's very autobiographical. The young woman who made it is very much like her character in the movie. She's obsessive about doing her own home animations that fit perfectly into the Apple story. So they found her and gave her a shot at doing this. And I think she pulled it off with incredible skill and sensitivity. It is a really beautiful piece to watch. My wife, I said, "Hey, look at this." One of my friends sent it to me yesterday or day before. And it literally emotionally had a tremendous pull on her. So I think that's serious.
And again, when they're showing these and people are seeing the results, at high resolution. I mentioned this yesterday, and I mentioned it a couple of times last week. I was surprised at how quickly a film company asked me what the delivery specs were for an iPhone. Like, it was within a week after the keynote, it had legitimized the idea that you could use an iPhone for interview, for like delivering an interview or delivering something else. I was like, oh, it'll be high enough quality. And I would say, for many things that I do, you could, for single setup kind of things. And we're going to start playing. I've got enough cameras that I'm going to start playing with the idea of like, what could we do live? Like, could we have 5 iPhones that are running live and see what that actually looks like? Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Mitchell, you made the comment, I think you said you have a hard time imagining using a phone as a camera. I want to remind you that your iPhone 6, that one. It's like using an edit system from the 90s. I mean, it feels that antiquated. Like the new cameras are in the new phones cameras. I just said it. They're really amazing. They're really, really good. So I would shoot everything. I could shoot it all. I don't do great stuff. I could shoot all my work on iPhones, all of it, no problem. And I'd be very happy with the footage.
Yeah, and there's so much creativity. You know, there's something about it that with all the lenses and being able to swap back and forth and everything else, there's a lot. And I watch my kids use, you think we're good at, doing iPhones. You should, my kids are masters of the 0.5 lens. Like my daughter will just pick up the phone and go like this. She goes like this, and then she puts her tongue out like in this thing, and you take a picture, and there's like a look that a lot of the high school, it's like, and it's like this weird big eyes with a thing. But it's really funny. But what's funny is how fast she can do it. Like she knows, it's like muscle memory to do these things. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like a rebuttal to Chris, but I appreciate what you're saying. But I just want an iPhone to be a phone. I don't need to pay for the extra stuff.
Which is funny because I hate my iPhone as a phone. Like if you call me, what goes through my head, if you call me without a schedule, what goes through my head is what? Like you didn't even text me? The only people who get to call me without texting me first or without creating a schedule is like my mom and my wife. Like those are the two that are allowed to just call off the phone. But, my kids can do it, but I'm still like, what are we doing here?
But they better have a good reason.
My kids won't do it because they're more socialized to the idea of like, hey, can you talk for a second is a pretty common, thing for them. But I will tell you, if you're not in my family and you call, if you're not in my family and you call, I just generally won't pick up the phone unless you're my client. If you're my client, I'll pick it up.
Call you all the time now, just out of the blue.
I'll just be like, I'll just ignore it. You'll just go, how quickly it goes to voicemail. But my phone is set to do not disturb all the time, so it's hard to call me because my phone is 100% on do not disturb unless I'm waiting for a call from a client or somebody that I'm working on something. I turn all of my machines off because
I was very tempted to just try to call you on your phone.
Won't work. It just goes straight into it because notifications is the death of deep thinking. Anyway, go ahead, Mark.
So logistically, if you wanted to go buy 3 or 4 iPhones to use them specifically as cameras, can you do that without having to get a carrier?
Wait, say that again.
If you wanted to buy 3 or 4 cameras, 3 or 4 iPhones just to use as cameras,
you can use.
How do you do that without
Apple.
having to pay for the carrier?
Apple. You go to the Apple store. Just say you don't want to carry. You don't want to choose right now. And you won't have to. You won't have to put a phone number on them. I've done it. So I've bought like 4 Usually we put some kind of base carrier on it because we want it. But you can say I just don't want a carrier on it. Yeah. But you can't buy them from. And I would highly recommend always buying your iPhones from Apple. Like buy your Apple hardware from Apple. I know there's a lot of people who resell it and everything else. Oh, it's so complicated. They don't, like Apple automatically puts it into your Apple Care. They automatically have registration for it. They automatically have all these other things. It just works. And when I bought them from Amazon, I bought them from AT&T, I bought them from the Verizon store, and all of them are hell. Like it's just, and it takes longer to buy it. It takes longer the support is nasty. It's just a really, really painful. Like just buy your phones just buy your Apple products from Apple. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and just a reminder, kids out there, if you're shooting a major motion picture on your iPhones, remember to put it in airplane mode so that you don't get a call in the middle of that 3-minute long Steadicam shot that you're setting up with a crew of 60 to 70 people.
Yes.
That could ruin your whole day.
You can just kill the cell. Turn off the cell.
And doesn't it require, to use the camera, doesn't it require iCloud connection?
No, I don't think so. Oh, I don't know why it would. Because you can record, you can just record to it doesn't need an iCloud connection. It would just record to the iPhotos library. My photos library doesn't require iCloud to operate, and
but it doesn't it require a Apple account though to tie it to?
I don't know.
To unlock it?
I've had an Apple account for a long time,
to
so
unlock
I don't know.
It? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what I don't know. I don't have any point of reference for that. Like I don't know. Maybe I've just always had a. We take our iPads off accounts, but you usually leave it on some account. We give it some account because it's easier to install. You can't put any apps on it without the account. So that.
Yeah, I had a horrible time in doing TV shows because they'd have product placement from Apple, so they'd have 30 iPads, and I had to put them all on my own account, to transfer images back and forth to all of them. Yeah.
We definitely build. We usually have event or company accounts that we put everything on, and again, it's really convenient once it's on. so it's hard. I found some old iPads, and it's hard though because I have to remember what the passwords were. I'm like, I have no idea what these passwords were for this iPad. So there's like me calling people and pinging Kevin Hansen, like going, "What is the password for this? What did we use back then?" He's like, "Oh, it's this one." Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. But when you put, but when you put 30 iPads on your account and you hand them to extras,
I would never do that.
Not a good thing.
I would never. That's why we have company accounts. Is that I would never give someone. Yeah, I would never give someone my account. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So I have my personal phone and I have a business phone, and then the phone. 2 phones before that I still have. It's long been disconnected from everything. It's just a phone, or I can't remember what it is. It's probably an iPhone 8 or something like that. But if I have to go out and just shoot a photo or use a third camera as an overhead or something like that, I'll just use that. So it's sad because I'm gaining more phones in my life. But for those odd cases where I want to have multiple camera angles, it's great to have them around.
By the way, I recommended this on MacBreak just because we're talking about photos on the iPhone. Is like, I got this little Fuji printer for my daughter. It was actually a test to see how they worked. I just said, I just need you to test this for me for MacBreak. But these are like little Polaroids that it prints out. It prints out these little Polaroids. It's like very kawaii. And so but it, she wanted them for her like scrapbook and stuff like that. And there's a whole second hour somewhere of printing our images because I would highly recommend it. I really have gotten to we're going to be the most undocumented, in the history of the world. We'll have the least number of photos.
Digital dark
soon.
ages.
Yeah. So I'm starting to get ready to refresh my printers so that I can print. I was starting to print them, and then my printer, it stopped working probably because of some ink jam, and then I just didn't get back to it. So I'm going to get them going again and start printing archive photos of all the ones that matter to me. Next question.
As expected, OpenAI is in multiple questions here. We'll go through them one at a time. The first one from Andy Kokendorfer in VR, Florida. Sam Altman is back at OpenAI with a new board. Strange that Microsoft would let go of its position, he wonders.
Go, John.
Today on as OpenAI churns, we need a VO on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Courtney, for the next 30 days, we'll need it. Microsoft.
We got to go. These are the lives of OpenAI.
So
like
Microsoft didn't lose any position here. They're in a perfect position. They own 49% of OpenAI. Whether Sam leaves or not, they're in a perfect position. Part of that equity was gained on credits from Azure. And so they didn't put that much money into this deal, about $13 billion. Part or most of that is in Azure credits. Microsoft is in an amazing position here, and we'll see what happens day to day.
Yeah, it's what a week. 5 days of insanity. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia, same topic. As much as I want to save this for Monday, I might ask it again. Let's talk business and leadership. What are your thoughts about the future of OpenAI with Sam Altman and the board?
Go ahead, John.
Just reading about some of the new interim members on the board, Brett Taylor, Larry Summers, and Adam. Adam was one of the original members that it looks like it's going to sustain the new board moving forward. Larry Summers is Secretary of Treasury in 1999, and Brett Taylor was the one of the inventors of Google Maps and chairman of Twitter and CEO of Salesforce. So they're bringing in more business-minded people to the board, which looks like where Sam needs it to go.
I think Brett Taylor and Larry Summers are amazing ads. Like they're really, they're going to bring some sanity to the board. They've done this for a long time. They've seen a lot of different things. They've worked in, a lot of different areas. They're definitely going to bring some more stability to it. I think that I really thought if they hadn't figured this out by the end of this week, I was calculating that OpenAI wouldn't make it to the end of the year. Like it was literally just going to get cored out. And so there was not really a lot for the board. And, I think that the thing that was really, I think might have pushed them forward is they can say that one of the possible nonprofit outcomes is to destroy the company. But the problem is the idea behind OpenAI was to have a place at the table, to be able to do things. And they were about to lose all of that. Like they're about to have no impact on the rest of and if anything, they just poured gas on the whole system and then dumped out of it. So it was a really I think they had to do what they needed to do. I was kind of surprised that they kept Adam D'Angelo. I don't know why they kept him. I would have dumped everybody that voted that way because it was a horrible idea. I mean, at least off the board because it was a horrible idea. And it was but the problem was you take a bunch of folks that don't have that are mostly academic, and I would consider Quora kind of mostly academic. It's kind of just a place of crazy. It's like Reddit on acid, and so I would say that you take a bunch of academics and put them all together to run a company. It's like throwing snowflakes into a sauna. It just wasn't where they needed to be, and so I think that and they just melted down. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed to see him go back because I wanted to sell my Microsoft stock at its high. But full disclosure, all they have to do is sell 1% over to Microsoft now, and then they'll have controlling interest if things get dicey with the new company, new reorganized company, let's just say.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so Courtney, concerning your stock price, this is interesting. Here's the last month of Microsoft. Here's the last 5 days. This is Monday when all the news broke. Yesterday's turmoil, Tuesday it dropped. It's back up. So you're good. Sell your stock.
All right.
There you go. Anyway, I think it probably is going to settle down now. Like I think that we'll have a couple more little bits of news. We'll find out what the final board is, and then we'll probably move on. Next question.
Comes from Awanahoe Black Bear Marshall in the Ojai River area up in Oregon. Is Sam Altman kind of a T.H. White situation for this, or is it just the newest news from Moidart?
I would have to say that you are much better read than I am. I don't know. I don't have any point of reference for that, so I don't know. If you get into any kind of more obscure literary references, I'll probably go over my head. I'm not a literary guy. Next question.
Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma is up next. What are your thoughts on using the Blackmagic Micro Studio Camera 4K G2 for Zoom meetings and seminars as opposed to the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K? And he's looking to judge cost, quality, size, and so forth.
Go ahead, Mark.
For the Zoom meetings, if you want to put one behind the teleprompter, it's going to be a lot easier to fit the Blackmagic Cinema camera than it is to use the studio camera because it's just big and bulky.
Yeah, the Micro Studio, what it really excels at is being an overhead camera. So a camera that's looking down on something that you want to show, something that, those kinds of things. You can put a motorized lens on it and then control the zoom of that lens. If you get the Panasonic iOS, the powered zooms, there's a couple powered zooms that you can get from Panasonic and put on those, and you can zoom in, you can focus, and so on and so forth. So I would use those that way. I wouldn't probably it's not a bad main camera. The main problem with using it as a webcam is really autofocus. And I used one for years on this show, and now that I'm using a Sony, I'm back to an FX30. I'm going to send the other one back. It's just the being able to be in focus all the time is pretty awesome. Like I just have to say, and so the being able to have fast focus. I was using an EVZ1 until yesterday, and it died for the last time. It's died like 10 times since I bought it. it's just it's some kind of heat problem, and so I've removed it from the system back to the FX30. But so Sony has its own problems, but I would say that, and I've done everything. Everyone's like, did you use a dummy battery? Yes. Did you open the window? Yes. Did you like I've done all the things I should do, and it's still not working. So anyway, but I would say that the Sonys are best as web cameras. I still do my production. I prefer production if I'm controlling the zoom. So if I'm doing a production where I'm controlling zoom, I still prefer the files that I get from a small camera perspective. I prefer the files that I get from Blackmagic over the Sonys. But for as webcam, I'd recommend the Sonys. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tim Mann. Excuse me. In Melbourne, Australia. What model decimator would you have in your kit for troubleshooting?
Go ahead, Guy.
The one that's been in most of our kits is this one, the MDHX. It's got 2 HDMIs on the side and then 5 on the other side. So you can go in and use it as a DA. So say, for instance, you wanted to a distribution amplifier. If you wanted to take that one SDI signal and feed it out to 4 confidence monitors, you could do that. If you had a confidence monitor that was HDMI, you can also go in SDI, flip it back out HDMI, and you can also change the frame rate. I'm using one right now to flip my teleprompter, so you can do things like flip. It's a handy device to have, especially for Mac computers. I've saved many shows with these things where sometimes the projector just won't sync up, or the Mac or the PC won't sync up, and boom, drop one of these in the line, and you've solved it. So great piece of kit to have just in case of emergency.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. The MDHX is great, but what I would do if you're only going to get one to throw in your kit, I would get the MD Cross, because it does everything the MDHX does, but it has built-in test generators, so it can generate all types of HD signals, test signals, so you can send those down the line and test your monitors and stuff without having camera set up or anything else. You have color tests and color charts and color bars and pluged tests and all kinds of test charts are available on the MD. It's only $100 more. The HX is $300 and the cross converter is $395. So go an extra $100.
I will agree. For testing, I would say the cross is better. I found that it was much easier for us to get lost in our settings on the cross than the MDHX. So we had usually a cross in a kit to do exactly what Courtney was talking about. But what we issued everybody was MDHXs because they would get lost in the menus. The HDX cross has just a lot of other things, and you get it into a state that was really hard to get out of if you weren't connecting it to a computer. It's funny, like Kevin Hansen and I go back and forth. I don't know how to use the software for it. Like, I don't know how to plug the thing into something and set the settings. All I know how to do is use the little buttons on the front. And he's exactly the opposite. so it's like, he's like, I can't change the settings because I can't plug it into a computer. I'm like, plug it into a computer? How do you do that? So we're on the two opposite ends of that spectrum. Next question.
Next one comes from Robert Sababity in Poland. And he says, does anyone in the panel use a comm system? And he notes he recently tested the Saromonic WiTalk, which feels like a good value for the price. Any comments?
A good guy.
Yeah, if you've tested them and they're good value, it rides on that 1.9 gigahertz, which is the same as the one that I would recommend that I see a lot of folks using out in the field, which is the Hollyland SolidComm C1. And in these kits, you can get a variety of different packs. So you can just get the 2 or the 3 or the 6 or the 8. And these ones actually have good reviews. I looked up that so that you can see there's 7, almost 5-star reviews. On those Saromonics, I didn't see any reviews, so it's kind of tough to without getting my hands on them to see what the quality's like. But those do rely on the 1.9 gigahertz. So, it's not going to be the $20,000 comm systems that you'll be able to rent if you don't want to make that investment and get you that really long range. And there's other things like party lines that you can program with the higher end systems like readout, but again, most of us are not at that level. So having the Hollyland SolidComms even at $2,000, it might be a stretch for some folks, but it's a robust and affordable system.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, just based on my experience with the Saromonic little mixers that are lightning connected that I've used with my phones for a long time, I would call it good. I wouldn't call it excellent. It does everything it's designed to do. It's a bit plasticky. It's got a 9-volt battery in it, the one that I use, but I've gotten really good, solid, decent results out of it. It's not up in the Electrosonics kind of perfect sound category, but a couple of them, I have 2 of those mixers, and I use them a good little bit when I need to get an XLR mic fed into my phone for some reason, and they've been solid and they've worked fine. I've had them for about 4 or 5 years, so I'd call it a good, basic thing.
Yeah, I in a controlled environment or in a relatively isolated environment, I think that they'd actually probably work okay. So if you're if you're doing a shoot and you're somewhere that isn't around a lot of other things, because the problem is that there can be a lot of crosstalk in what the frequency that they're using here. So that could be a challenge here. Now at 1.9, my only question is this on the decked format? I'm not sure. We'll have to do a little bit more research on these. But that's what FreeSpeak is on as well. So you have to kind of take that into account. In an event, at an event center, you're going to have a lot of other things that are going on in the platform. And you may want to think hard about renting something like a FreeSpeak, which is what we've used a lot of. Obviously, Redo has the Bolero, which is great, but it really requires engineering talent to put it together. Like you need to have a guy on the ground to manage a Bolero, and that's their only job. But it's really powerful. The FreeSpeak, oftentimes our A1 can put it together. We still oftentimes dedicate a person to comms because we have so many people on them. If you have 5 or 6 people and you're calling cameras and you're in a studio, that's where they're showing some of these examples, or you're in a remote location that doesn't have a lot of crosstalk, I think you might be able to do pretty well. I think we'd have to, as Bill said before, we should probably test it before we make any hard decisions because it might work great. Go ahead, Bill.
I just looked it up. It's not in the 2.4 gigahertz band, which is good if it's operating down. It's in 1.9, so at least it'll be less crowded than the craziness in 2.4.
Yeah. So, but I'd love to see it. What I'm not totally sure of is how many channels and PLs and the remotes. Like a lot of times we're used to having a fair amount of control over that. Of who's listening to what and how they listen to it. For large shows, for the kind of shows that I work on a lot, the comms are half the show. Like I have a show in February and I'm submitting lists of the people for the February event next week. So 2 months ahead of time, I'm sending out, or more than 2 months ahead of time, I'm sending out, these are all the people I want on the comms because they're building the comm structure now. We're going to start testing those comms in about a week and a half. So comms are super important as you start to build up. And so building very complex PL systems and point-to-point systems is really important. Next question.
This is not for that. They say 8 remote and 1 master headset.
They set up to 17, they have up to 17. But
it's not for what Alex is talking about.
I would like to test it though. I mean, I'd love to test these out and it's the kind of thing that I might rent a FreeSpeak, but then grab one of these and play with it. At the same, how does it hold up next to it to know where? A lot of times it's not a matter of is something good or bad. It's will it fulfill the need here or not? But what I will say is that the thing that scares me the most about less expensive comms is if your comms break down, all kinds of chaos occurs, in a system, especially if you built it around being able to have comms. Now you're suddenly in this place where you can't talk to anyone. I've lost comms in the past and we were on cell phones cell phone bridges trying to just keep the show going. No fun. Then I started investing in comms. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. Did YouTube happen to flag yesterday's show for our educational demonstration using well-known movie clips?
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, well done yesterday, Alex. So we saw some good comments, how everybody enjoyed seeing, the queued up footage, but also being able to telestrate right over the top. And I think that's what helped the algorithm. So the algorithm not getting a strike. So here is the back end, and survey says channel not affected. So content identified in this video is listed below, nothing. So no copyright content was found in your video. So it looks like we got a pass. So education wins.
Yeah, if you're stopping and starting, oftentimes it's not going to identify it as well as the fact that it is, I knew that it was already on other channels that are not, official channels. That's where I grabbed it from. So sometimes I can do that knowing that it's going to be, from that position. I know that they might have gotten flagged, but they're not going to get. So the worst case scenario that I looked at is that it could be demonetized, but I didn't care because we're not worried about that. We're what we leave up on YouTube is mostly a service to the members. I'm not trying to make money on that piece. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and you were the poster child for fair use. This is educational content.
It doesn't get much
perfectly
more
for education. This is it.
If I had gotten flagged and I really wanted to make us think about it, I'm as down the middle of fair use as you could get.
As you can possibly get.
Yeah, so I wasn't too concerned. The only thing I care about is, again, YouTubers who are making money on YouTube advertising care a lot about demonetization, and that's where most of the enforcement has gone. The only thing I worry about is strikes, because you can only get 3 strikes in 6 months, and once you get 3 strikes, you can't stream. So I worry about strikes, and there's very few. Usually bands, Eagles being one of them, that are backwards enough to actually give people strikes. So, and actually, I think it has a detrimental effect on their overall popularity because they just get used a lot less. If you look at the person that probably knows the most about how to let people use your stuff is Taylor Swift, because she doesn't, she'll track it, but she's not. I don't think she even demonetizes it. She just tracks. You can do tracking, but if you look at like Shake It Off, the number of videos, it was, I think, over 100,000 videos were created based on her song, and that definitely impacted this tour. Like that connection that people have to that song and to other songs that she makes because she allows them to do that. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin is back again with streaming to YouTube with 8 megabits per second. Am I assuming correctly that a 1080p 60 stream gets much more compressed than a 1080p 30 stream? And so if streaming a panel discussion, is 1080p 30 preferable over 1080p 60?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes. I would go at 1080p 30. A panel discussion doesn't have any, high-speed action or anything in it, so I think that would be fine. If you're doing sports, maybe you want to rethink that. But for a panel discussion, I think it's fine. Your computer will have less work to do if it's going to try and compress it if the input requirements for YouTube are 1080p 30 to crush it down before it sends it. And you're having to deal with half the amount of data going into that compressor.
So the funny thing is, I agree that in general, when constrained with data rates, I would definitely go down to 30. That's the first thing that you would cut as your frame rate. But I will say, by the way, the target you should have is not 8 but 12. 12 or 16 megs is where you want to stream your to YouTube. That's what you want to deliver your 1080p 60 at. I'm not going to get into the math right now, but there's a mathematical equation there for your compression, and 12 megs is what you should consider a minimum target for 1080p 60. And so you are going to be over compressed, much more compressed, because 6 megs is what we target 1080p 30. What I will say is there's something about adding more frames that makes something feel more present. And I made fun of that for a solid decade when people said that. And as I started to shoot 60 frame per second things, I realized that there's something as you go up in that frame rate, there's something that feels more real and people feel more connected to it. And it's a feeling thing that people have. And what we really see it is at 120. At 120, it just feels like a window, but as we approach that 120, we end up with something that feels more like you're there. So we're still doing 30 mostly because this is 30 because Zoom is at 30. But I don't think it's bad. I think it's fine. But I do think that there is a potential advantage to going to 60. I run most of my shows are actually run at 60 frames a second now, 60 whole frames, but progressive, not interlace trash. Next question.
John Foltz, Sealings Grove, Pennsylvania. Could someone explain how to set the USB inputs on a MixPre so that the Fenwick SoundDesk trick works? I'm having trouble with that.
Go to Chris.
Yes. Here's the problem. Sorry about that. When we did this setup with you, Alex, it was super simple. Remember, I even said, hey, we got to be worried because this is going to go south. When I did the setup with Nigel, we had a problem. What I would like to do with John and possibly Nigel is set up a time where we can all get in after hours.
That's great, but we can't keep on throwing things to after hours. Like if you can show something, that'd be great.
I have nothing to show you because I don't know what the problem is yet.
Well, I think that just I think we can't keep on throwing things to after hours. We have to okay. So the I think that explain how the USB inputs work, but I think that the USB inputs. Let's see here. I'll open up Loopback here. We'll take a look at it. So here's I think that the question really is, I think that, John, if you can be more specific about like what you're having trouble with. You're having trouble with it, but what is not, the question is what part of it are you having issues with? So if we look at this here. So this is what we had talked about before with the sound. This is the SoundDesk input to those output channels. So this is getting everything to the SoundDesk. Now, if you're talking about the MixPre, that's my MixPre to Zoom. There's so many.
And you're looking at the loopback settings.
Is that what he's looking at, or is he looking at?
Well, that's what I'm seeing here is loopbacks patching.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what he's having trouble with or not. If the question is are you having, let's see, let me jump into audio settings here. If the question is how do you set this, the other thing that you have to look at is if your MixPre is set up, if your device is set up for more than one channel. By the way, if you turn off the outputs on your MixPre, this option will turn off, like it won't appear. So it'll only appear if you have the other channels available. And so here you can turn channels on and off here inside of Zoom. So those are the things. But if you let us know whether you're having trouble in Loopback or whether you have trouble in Zoom or whether it's both, we can definitely jump into after hours on it. But we'll keep on trying to use the show to do that. Next question.
Next one comes to us from David in London, and David asks, a music store in Germany is offering a significant Black Friday discount, 52% off, for the Boss GCS-8 Gigcaster8. How does this mixer compare to the RodeCaster Pro II? And that's a QR code question.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't looked at all the specs on this, and I'm coming to you on a RodeCaster Pro II. It looks very similar in design, and if you look at it, it has the same number of little buttons there to play back stuff, and it has a mute and a solo button on each input. It has multiple inputs. Some of them are dedicated, since it has, if you look up here, these buttons for these channels, you only have 4 channels that are fixed preamp inputs, and then the rest is a Bluetooth, a phone, a USB, and these are dedicated. So I don't think it's as flexible as the RodeCaster. The RodeCaster you can assign any of those things to any of the channels or virtual channels. So you have a little more flexibility in channel assignments with the RodeCaster. I did notice that I went looking for sales on this. There were a lot of open boxes for sale for cheap, which leads me to believe that a lot of people bought it, didn't like it, and sent it back. So I'd be wary of that. I haven't, like I say, I haven't used this. So look online for some comparison reviews, see if somebody has reviewed both of them. Half off is a pretty good price, but whether or not that's an open box or B stock, that remains to be seen.
Next question. Sorry, this got turned around on me here.
That's okay. Next question comes to us from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Is there a part that I can put on my mixer to give me a readout of the decibels that are entering my headphones before I even start any sound? Ear damage prevention and understanding limits, I believe, is his goal here. Another QR code question.
I don't think you can do that. I don't think it's possible. I don't think you can. I don't think you can do this. I'm going to Bill. I'm going to really fast, like 10 seconds.
Yeah, I don't think you can either, because you need to have some sort of transducer at the earphone to get its accurate reading.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the impedance of the headphones affects the sound output, and so it depends on what headphones you'd be plugging in.
Yes, and everything, because it's what comes out of that speaker, and you'd have to be able to measure. Decibels are really something you'd measure there, so it would be very, very difficult. We'll be jumping into another hour of Q&A, so if you've got questions, you can go ahead and throw them in. We've got a fair number of them in there, so if you're in Makana, make sure to vote on the questions. We don't have as many votes for the second hour, so get in there, let us know what order you'd like us to answer these questions, and so throw those questions in. If you have new questions, go ahead and ask those right now in Makana, or you can use askofficehours.global. So you can go to askofficehours.global, throw those questions into that drop, and we will file them into the system as we go. And a quick reminder that we will be doing a volunteer meeting on Saturday. That is still going to happen this week. So if you're a volunteer, the new volunteer one was last Saturday. The regular volunteer one is this Saturday. Every Saturday we have some sort of meeting. Jumping in the second hour. And we're back for more questions. Let's go to the next question.
Matthias Utila in Helsinki, Finland says, considering to upgrade comm system to Unity from Discord, should a dedicated Mac Mini be reserved to run Unity? Small team, he has 3 to 6 people and want to send program audio to all participants and more than one PL, party line. What else is needed on the top of a base license?
Go ahead, Chris.
Matthias, I haven't actually set this up, but I do know that Doug Ferguson, part of the Discord and Office Hours community, he has his Unity package is all set up on a Mac Mini, and he is able to manage it remotely. So if you're in the process of evolving, keep in mind there are people that have these setups that can set up to do a show for you quite quickly. That's what I do. I just use Doug. I go, hey, Doug, I need 6 comms, and here's the names, and he sends me an email back. It's quite handy. But yes, a Mac Mini will run a Unity instance quite well.
Yeah, and I would dedicate a computer to it, and I would get usually. It's pretty easy to upgrade, but I would still look at getting 5 more licenses than you need. It's just like so you're not sitting there like figuring out how to do the upgrade and how to do the other things there. Just get a 5. For me, I think we have. I think at this point the Unity system that we use for some of the stuff we use is probably 40 licenses, or somewhere in that range, 40, 50 licenses. But there's also an unlimited version that you'll get to someday if you keep going down that path. But I think if you're looking for 3 to 6, I think there's a 10-person license that you can jump onto that I would probably recommend to give you a little bit of headroom. You can just throw it right in. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say early on in the pandemic, I was doing a show out of a retail outlet in San Francisco, and I was using Tucker's Unity instance, and Tucker was just basically spying on the show the whole day. And as I'm walking out at the end of the day, one of the producers came up to me and asked, hey, could we add a couple more people in the comms? And I literally had Tucker on my earbuds all day long. And in my head, I hear him go, yes, I can do that right now. Like it was just like having a little spy in your, little spy in your pocket. And it was great. And the possibility of more licenses being added at the last minute is very, very common.
Yeah. And also consider, like I have a PDF that I made that shows people how to do it. It reduced all of our questions to 0. Like it is like a step 1, step 2, step 3. It's a bunch of pictures. I took screen captures. I have things that go over top of it, like just type this in, and it's like 8 pages or 6 pages or something like that. And we just send that out to clients, and we put a lot of clients that have never seen it. And I have one for Unity and one for ClearComm, both the exact same thing. And when I send it out, I get no feedback. Like nobody asks how to get on. Next question.
Looks like Michelle Patria in Poland. I might have got that wrong, sorry. Are there filters or special glass so that, for example, lights or the operator are not reflected in the glass? What's the best way to deal with situations like this?
Go ahead, Courtney.
There are coatings, however, they're quite expensive. Fluoride coatings or anti-reflective coatings you can put on glass, but you wouldn't want to do that in a situation where you're trying to eliminate the reflection of a camera operator in a pane of glass, for example, in a window. We deal with that in television shows. What they do is, let's say you have a bullpen that's supposedly surrounded by glass and you're shooting inside that thing all day. You never want to see the camera operator or the camera reflected in the glass that's behind people. So every single piece of glass in that set is designed to gimbal, so it rotates, 3 or 4 or 5 degrees in either direction, so that you can position it so that it's reflecting something else in the room rather than the camera operator. So that's how we deal with it on Hollywood sets. If you're dealing with it in a situation where you don't have control, you're not building the set, you can't build gimbals in, you use a polarizing filter, which you can get and put on the camera. Here's a linear polarizer. Make sure it's not a circular polarizer. A linear polarizer you can rotate and it will eliminate reflections in glass. However, a warning, it does increase the saturation of all your colors and everything. A skin will look a little bit weird because you're not seeing any reflectivity off of people's skin. And so their faces look much redder or much more colorful than they would without the polarizing filter. The anti-reflective fluoride coating is used on the back of, let's say, prompter glass to keep interlens reflections from showing up, or it's used sometimes in the front of filters that you put on the camera so that if they're flat filters, so that they're not reflecting light back onto the actors. So fluoride coating would be what you need in that case if you're worried about reflections back into the scene.
Go ahead, Bill.
Courtney got most of it. I will only add that one of the things I used to always carry on field shoots were 4 pop-ups. They were white on one side and black on the other, and I would always use the black side to kill reflections off reflective surfaces. Look at the scene, see what it's reflecting, and put that black blocker between what is being reflected and the camera or the glass, and it'll just eliminate that. It got to the point where we had one in a grooming center for one of the PetSmarts, and I had to bring in 45 feet of black pipe and drape, and we just set it in front of that whole window so that none of the products on the shelves, which were a horrible problem at first, would reflect, worked perfectly.
Yeah, the Mickey's suggesting dulling spray, which works really well. You'll now understand why everyone wears black on set. So,
yeah, right there.
Everyone's got black to reduce the reflections that might show up. I had a friend that spent a couple years ago, maybe a decade ago, a couple years now. I'm getting to that age where you go a couple years ago, and it turns out to be 10 or 15 years ago. But they spent, I think, 9 weeks rotoing out reflections out of car windows, like of cranes and things. It was all effect shots. But so Roto can help too. Next question.
Daniel Partridge in Rochester, Minnesota, have been really tempted to buy the Presonus Revelator IO24. Normally use the Focusrite 2i2 in conjunction with the QL1, but thought this might be nice for times with no QL1 since it has the built-in DSP and meters. It's now on sale for $99. Is this a good idea?
The Presonus is a really nice interface, and for $99, it's a great deal. Like, that's a great deal for the Presonus. I have a hate relationship with the Focusrite 2i2. So I don't, some people have a love-hate with it. It just burns up so much. It has burned up so much of my time that I'm bitter about it. So of supporting other people with them that can't get it to work. So that's the only thing I'll say. I know people who have been very successful at using it. I just spent a lot of times up against that wall. So if I was going to lean between the two, I think the Presonus Revelator is a pretty nice box. I have one. I don't use it very much because I have a MixPre 3, but I have one, and I've tested it, and I thought it was a very solid box. And at $99, it's a great deal. The other thing to look at if you're just looking for a basic interface is this. I think I have one here. Maybe not in reach. The Shure makes this X2U. The new one is pretty solid as well. Next question.
Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas, up next with regarding managing multiple Apple devices. Any advice on transition to Apple Business Manager and mobile device managers? And he's wondering if Kandji, Kandji, is a good option. There's
a company out of Canada, and for some reason I just just can't Jamf. The one that almost everybody that I know that does fleet management is Jamf, and I've worked with a bunch of the guys on some projects, and they're smart people. So I would look hard at Jamf, JAMF. Next question.
Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma is up next. What would be the better camera? The Canon EOS R100 mirrorless camera with an 18 to 45 millimeter lens, or the Sony ZV-E10 mirrorless camera with a 16 to 50 millimeter lens. The Canon is cheaper, but some have stated that the focusing mechanism is subpar. Use case is Zoom meetings.
I would lean towards the Sony's for the focus for a webcam. So I don't know enough about the Canon to know. I can tell you that the Sony is the best autofocus that I've used, and I'm using one right now. I'm using FX30. I do have the EV10. The only thing else, the ZV-E10, I have one of those as well. I don't know if I have it in reach. I have a couple of the Sonys. The problem with the E10 is the same problem with the ZV-E1 or Z1 or EV-Z1. That's Sony does not know how to name products. Anyway, I'm having a lot of overheat problems with that one, and so the overheating inside of the Sonys, the FX30 does not seem to have that problem, which is why I'm back on an FX30. But the other ones I'm having some, heat management issues, and that's with a dummy battery, with the window opened, at highest maybe 72, 73 degrees in the room. I just don't. I'm having some confidence issues on the smaller Sony cameras. So for that process. Next question.
Mark Sanderson in Chesterfield in the UK. The Roland Aerocaster is a switcher designed for iPhones. Could it be used in a professional capacity? And that's one of our QR code questions.
Yeah, I haven't used the Roland. I don't think anybody here has used the Roland. I put it in to do research on it. And then
Looks a little like the MX-1, kind of, but it's got obviously very different capabilities and designed for web streaming.
Yeah, it's all of these. I'd like us to get to a point where we start. It's really built as a hardware interface with an iPad. Who else does that? There's someone else that we've had on the show that does that as well. I'm just coming up with names quickly. But yeah, so this is designed so that your iPhones can connect to your iPad, and then you have a hardware interface to actually do. And there's a couple companies that have done these kind of iPad-based solutions. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I took a look at this at CES when it first came out, and I thought that it was going to be the bee's knees for beginning production. As it evolved out, though, there's a guy, Chris Carson, who's really into this mobile streaming market. And looking at his landscape, he uses Switcher Studio, which is a popular iPad app. And the clarity of that one and the way that they update that app is what makes that thing a total success. So if you're in the research phase, look at Switcher Studio and compare the two, because people that are doing this professionally are able to do it with Switcher Studio, whereas I used to be a Roland dealer and I love their products, but this one was not a home run for us. So I can't say that this is one where I would recommend it for a professional solution. I would go with what's tried and true and what others are using.
And Cinemaker is the other one. That's the name I was reaching for. Cinemaker is probably another one. Have you tested that one, Guy? Have you played with Cinemaker at all?
Yeah, Cinemaker's pretty decent, but again, Switcher Studio is one of those ones where it's the users are pushing that developer to keep going down the path, and they have the money to do it. Whereas some of these other ones, it just wasn't a home run, so that there's less developers doing things.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're going to use the iPhone, I guess it's an okay solution. It doesn't. One thing I don't like about it is it has no HDMI input, so you can only use your phone or USB, like a webcam, interface into it. It does have analog audio inputs, and it has a much better mixer than, let's say, the A10 Mini does. It's about the same price as an A10 Mini Pro. So. But it does have those sliders for control of the audio on the front, so that's a plus for it. But I haven't used it.
Again, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, that was the thing when I was testing one of the sister products in that line, that it was limited to 1280 by 720, and I was like, "What in the world? Come on, guys!" Like,
Yeah.
Is
it still limited to that? Is it still limited to 720p?
I'm pretty sure this one's 720 as well on the wireless factor. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of a deal breaker. Next question.
Roger Martin, coming to us from the Tonto Basin area in Arizona. I'm streaming 24/7 HD video to a CDN currently using vmix playlist for rotation and encoding 2 streams. Looking for scheduling, video software, and inexpensive hardware, PC or Macs, designed just for video streaming, also to be able to encode with AV1.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the AV1 part as far as what can encode there, but there's a couple different ones that might be possible for you. As far as scheduling software, there is Softron makes one called Softron on the Air, which is a scheduling software that we use a lot for a lot of things, and it's very high quality. It has streaming built into it, so you can do a lot of those things internally to it. Another one is called Just Play, and from On the Air. And so Just Play is another one that is, these are scheduling software. These are really, and they're designed to run television stations, like to push these. They're not $10. I think they're in the $2,500 to $5,000 range to run the software. And I don't know, there's plenty of ones on the PC. I just don't know them. So the places that we've done that, and what they'll do is you can have ads that are dynamically added. You can have holes for live feeds. You can have a lot of things that are around those, and those are things that we're researching, potentially using for office hours as well, to run a longer, more 24/7 feed once we get our new place settled. Next question.
Here's yet another QR code submission. Mateo in Oakland, California says, has anyone ever tried to sync a Deity TC1 and a Tentacle Sync E to the same timecode? Does mix and match work?
Go, Guy.
Yeah, sure. As long as they're at the project's at the same frame rate, timecode's timecode. It doesn't matter who's the leader and who's the follower. So yesterday I showed these little TC1s, and the nice thing about having the same ones is that you get access to the app. Like, so with this one, I could say sync all, and boom, all of my TC1s or TC1s will sync up right away. So you can see that they're all moving at the same rate. But yeah, then I could jam. So what you do is the first initial jam, you're syncing the two together. But what a lot of people like to do is resync. That's why they'll leave these things hardwired into the camera or the recorder all day long, is so that they don't drift whatsoever, because there will be a tiny bit of drift after a certain amount of hours. So some people, like during lunch, they'll break and they'll rejam if they're not going to leave a hardwired device like a locket on it. So yeah, they'll definitely work together.
Next question.
Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California, up next with another QR code. I'm looking for a useful in-office PTZ webcam. Which do the panelists prefer, OBSBot or InstaLink 360?
Good, Chris.
Chris, I have both of them sitting right in front of me, and when I moved my office to my mom's house here, I picked the InstaLink to use for me because I didn't set up the other camera. And I think the reason I chose this one is because Alex had said he liked it better. But they're literally, it was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but by my eye. But I think that Alex prefers the InstaLink for faces and stuff.
Yeah, the thing that I have both. I have the OBSBot and the Insta360 link. And the issue with the OBSBot is that the Mac software is very buggy. Like, it's just super buggy. And so I got the OBSBot because it had an APIs that we could potentially grab onto it. But we haven't grabbed onto the API, and the software doesn't work very well. So I went back to the link. The OBSBot sits there with hopes that I might use it for something more. But that's the problem that I have with the OBSBot, is that the software is super buggy, and they should fix it. Next question.
Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma says, I want to add effects to my vocals for Zoom meetings, i.e. compression and EQ. Can I do it with GarageBand, Logic Pro, OBS? Those are programs I already have installed.
Good, Bill.
Well, there's probably a process through OBS and things like that. But generally, if you're doing a real-time thing, going out and coming back in tends to add latency into the system, so I'm not sure I would go in those directions. Also, I'm just going to say this, I'm now a firm believer in Alex's original thought here, is that I have stripped out all audio processing from my vocal chain. Other than that little bit of noise reduction, the longer you talk to people, the harder it is to have any processing on there because it just gets fatiguing over the course of time. As close as you can get to what it actually sounds like hitting the microphone diaphragm, sending out, to me, is the real standard that everybody should be pursuing.
Yeah, I've definitely found that over time that I've just slowly, I had a lot of stuff. I had tons of processing on these things, and I've gotten down to the point where I want it as raw as I can. I just want to clean up things. I just don't want as many S's. I also don't want, it's a little bit of noise reduction, but that's about it. It's same as Bill. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, has Courtney worked with James Burke?
Did you work with James Burke, Courtney?
Yes, we were talking earlier in the, I had it somewhere here.
Pre-show, yeah.
There was a show that James Burke did. We were talking about the Hotel del Coronado down in San Diego. And I worked on a James Burke thing called the Neuron Suite. We'll play 4 seconds of it here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, he used the Hotel del Coronado, as you can see here, as an example of the brain and how neurons work with the people working and all the stuff. And so we were able to work with James down at the Hotel Del for 2 or 3 days just to shoot that sequence of a longer series. That's just one part of the longer series called the Neuron Suite. So it was great to work with him and great to stay at the Hotel Del while we were there.
Yeah, I got to work with him a little bit about almost 20 years ago. And just one of the most inspiring people to be on the phone with. I just have to say that, like, the speed at which his brain works and he keeps it so interesting. I think people, like, he's just fascinating to listen to talk. You can just listen to him talk all day because it just gets you thinking. It's just really, his ability to package ideas is just amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Add one thing, he did wear the same cream-colored leisure suit that he wore in Connections. There you go.
That's great. And I will say, if you're listening to this and you haven't watched Connections, it is still, in my opinion, the gold standard for educational content ever made. Like, there is nothing that has ever happened before or after that is as good as that series. And I'm just talking about Connections 1. The other ones are good, but they're not gold standard. But the Connections 1 just reset that whole system, and we've never... I think, just haven't, in the vertical of cooking, Good Eats, which was based on it, got close as far as the quality of showing you how to do things, limited to the capabilities of that team to do computer graphics and so on and so forth. But I think that, somewhere in the future, my goal is always that we will start to produce videos that take the structure of what James Burke did and then add the capabilities that we have to make something really, exciting to watch about specific things. But that should be something, if you're doing educational material, you should watch Connections. And the result is, when my kids were 9 and 10 years old, if we played Connections on TV, you weren't allowed to talk in the room from their point of view. They were like, we're trying to keep up. Like, and they're 9 and 10 years old, like, talking about big history things and science and everything else. It wasn't just that it was very educational, it's that it was engaging. And it just, I think there's still an argument that we should go back and just capture it piece by piece, like just watch it piece by piece. It was also the largest budget that BBC and PBS had ever spent on anything at that point. And so they definitely played all the way in, and it's just an amazing, amazing collection. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida, back again. There are differences in gamma in Broadcast Rec 709 Standard and Apple QuickTime. How do you deal with this difference for delivery?
Go ahead, Bill.
So I had to make a switch, and it was a painful switch because I've been working in or around broadcast for most of my career, and I got to the point maybe 10 years ago where I suddenly realized that actually my deliverable audience was more in mobile devices than it was broadcast. So I started pulling back from being as obsessive about Rec 709 and broadcast standards and the scopes. I still have them. I still use them. I still care about that, particularly if I'm delivering into broadcast. But 99% of my efforts these days are to make sure that I'm okay with Apple's managed color pipeline, which they built back in when they first did OS 10 15 years ago. And if it's right on one iOS device now, if it's right on an iPad or an iPhone, I'm pretty sure that when I send it out, everybody watching on those same devices are going to get the exact same color experience I did, which was the whole hassle for me back in the Rec 709 days when everybody's monitor was tuned a little different and you were always trying to do to bars and tone to get a chance of being equal. And then you'd walk into a sports bar and every TV in there would look different and it was horrible. So I'm happy to live in Apple's managed color pipeline now. It makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, we used to joke that NTSC stood for never the same color. So, what were you going to say, Chris?
Never twice same color.
Well, we just called it never the same color. Anyway, so but I typically, if it matters, if the color matters that much, I'm sending it out to a colorist who's doing it in Resolve, and usually it's Charles doing it in Resolve, and they're looking at it on a color accurate monitor, and they're going to deliver the final piece, and I trust them to do that. But I will check it against my iPhone. So if I'm looking for something, I will. If my iPhone, without any of the colorations that it does for nighttime viewing or anything else, at full brightness, I'll look at something on my iPhone or my iPad, and I'll make decisions about it. Apple, those monitors as a walk around to look at something are the most accurate monitors that I know of. Next question.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. With machine learning AI available to replace and remove things, might we find more stop-motion animation with some puppetry for some shots?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's still just as tedious to shoot. One thing you might use the AI for is rig removal because
I think
a
that's
lot
what
of
he's
times,
talking about is being able to do rig removal.
Rig removal. What is it? Because a lot of times, anytime a puppet has to fly through the air or something, you got to have it up on wires, and you have to remove all those in post production. So AI would do a pretty good job of removing that, or even the pointers that they put in for measuring. In between each frame, they usually put them in and take them out, but you could just leave them in, I guess, and move them each frame without having to take them out each frame and just have AI remove the position pointers that markers or what I don't know what they call them, Alex, but these little devices that have little things that you point at, like where the character's hand is for the last frame, and then you take it out and then you move the hand, then you put it back in, and then you move the hand so you know how far you've moved it if you're moving it through the air. But you could use it for removal.
I love the look of stop motion, but it is the most impractical thing. Like, it's really fun for kids to learn because it's very organic, but it is like when you learn how to do this in a computer graphics program, you're like, I'm not going back. Like, I'm not going back to that. Like, I won't go back to having to commit to something and then realize that it was a little too fast, and now I can't do anything about it. I couldn't go back and fix it. I'm amazed by it. It's one of those things like I'm amazed. I look at it. I think this is, and I've done some stop motion, and I've done it all like a Saturday afternoon. I've done something for 3 seconds that I thought, and it was fun to do it as an experience. But I was like, I'm never doing production this way. This will make me crazy. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I used to do it with my 8mm camera, but these days with generative AI, and since you can now, video out of generative AI is still kind of dicey. But if you can say in the style of Rankin Bass, make this character and just animate that, you don't have to build a puppet to do any of the animation. Just let the generative AI just generate your whole animation.
It's going to be really interesting. We're already seeing some generative AI going into Blender and other things like that. And as that picks up, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the creative process. And again, I think that people say, well, all these artists, but I think that there's a lot of people that are creative that have ideas that they want to express that just can't do the thing. And there's a new program I was just looking at that I haven't tested enough to know whether it works or not. But you can just hum into it the tune that you want and then say, make that an electric guitar. And it just does it. And then you can hum the drums into it, and then you can hum the things into it, and that's not, it isn't skilled, but it doesn't mean that it's not creative. That you're thinking of something. You can hear something in your head that you want to put out. And I think there's an enormous number of people that have things in their head that they'd like ideas and concepts that they'd love to get out, even if it's just taking that concept to get it close enough that you can hand it to a professional who knows how to do it and let them do it again for you. I've talked to some supervisors, some visual effects supervisors who use Midjourney that way, where they describe something. I want this, I want this, I want this. Now they spent 20 minutes on something. They can hand it to a concept artist and say, that's what the direction that I'm looking for, but I want this and this and this. And then that artist, it saves them weeks of time of going back and forth, because to do that image would have taken that artist another couple days. They're not using that image. They're just using it as a reference point at like a mood board. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I wonder with all the deepfake work of being able to replace people's mouths on real cinematography, if you could just build the puppets without the mouths and then lay the dialogue and have AI generate just the mouth stuff and move it, it'd be a lot easier to generate and deepfake all. And then you could change the dialogue anytime you wanted to, and
everyone
not have to reanimate anything.
Every stop motion animator listening to the show is clutching their pearls right now. Like, how would you say that? Anyway, next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. What cloud providers does the panel prefer for virtual servers on FreeBSD or Linux?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, but I do have AWS, and there is a free tier that we use with the T2 micros. So in AWS, you could spin up these little free tiers that are totally free, as long as, like, a T2 micro is one where you can use their AMIs and just go ahead and put applications on those, and you can leave them on 24/7, and there's no charge. I also have Google Cloud, and I have Azure as well, and you can use those places to run your Linux servers. But the cost is, depending on how heavy weight of a machine that you use, will determine what kind of fee that you're going to pay. Because on a T2 micro, it'll go to about $0.01 an hour, depending on how long you've had your account. If they'll give you that totally free, but yeah, that's those are the three.
Next question.
Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles. Consensus on a mute button that is very clear that you are muted across all computers and software, such as Zoom, Teams, and so forth.
Good, Bill.
Some variation on hardware muting is what I have come down to. People here I know use Studio Technologies, more expensive boxes. I use I think it's $69 Rolls mic mute. But again, the thing about it is I know if the button's up or down, and I ran my finger against it. I have my actual one that's live under my finger right there. And if it's down, I'm on. If it's up, I'm off. There's no question for whatever service going out. It's the next thing to my mic fed into the in and out XLRs.
Yeah, I'm using a Studio Technologies 205. It's expensive, as Bill said, and because I'm sitting here. Yesterday, I sat here in meetings or podcasts for somewhere between 8 and 9 hours, and that's not an unusual Tuesday for me. I use this enough that my cost per hour on my 205 is pennies, pennies. So, or maybe nothing at this point. So it's buy one, cry once, as Chris would say. And I can, the advantage is I look down, I can just glance down at it, and it's a light. It's on or off. It's an analog input that's there. I can, and I also have, if I tie it to TalkBack, which I don't have set up right now, and you'll see me talking, and that's me pushing a TalkBack button. That means that when I want to talk back into, like, I'm about to split Unity, the comms we use for the show, into another computer, and this will go to that. And so when I push down, it'll go out of that and immediately be able to talk over, I'll be able to talk on Unity without having to even look at it if I'm trying to go to a specific channel. So that's the kind of stuff that you can do with it. Again, it's like $800 or something. It's not cheap. I think Bill's, I have one of Bill's as well. This is what you have, the Rolls mic switch.
Yeah, the MS-111. It's, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so this one, the thing, Bill's right that it does that. The clicking bothers me, just that it makes so much noise when it clicks. And then it's a little harder for me to look down and identify it. When you're used to, this would be fine if I was tuned to it. And when I'm used to a light, it's not enough. Like, I wish they'd put a light in it, and then I'd be happy. I do feel like there's a business that we should all get together as the office hours crew and start designing the pieces of hardware that we really need, that do exactly what we really need, and then put them out, because I'm just kind of like, everybody's
office
so close.
Hours branded hardware. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, because we're so close. Like, we're so close to the right thing.
We have a Fenwick framer.
Because I would,
exactly.
And my issue is that I would love to have something that was simpler than the 205 and less expensive than 205, that just had one little light that I could turn on and off. There's lots of products. I think maybe we'll do a second hour where we just do a brainstorming of all the products we should be building that no one's quite got right, including cameras. All right, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you could open that thing up and change the push switch out with one that had an additional terminal on it to switch an LED that you could mount outside somewhere in your field of view, so that when it's depressed, the LED turns red, et cetera, would be great. I always, as far as all software and a mute, the price of the mute switch that you and Mitch are using costs more than my RodeCaster Pro II, which has, of course, a mute button on all the inputs and it's silent. My problem is I can't see it from where I am and getting my hand to it because my mouse is over anyway. It's hard for me. If it were on the desk in front of me, it'd make perfect sense because it lights up red. When you hit it, it's completely silent to mute. But what I like using is the mute in Zoom or Teams, because not only does it give me an indication on the screen that I can see when it's muted, when it's not muted, but it gives everybody else the indication that's on the call that I'm muted or not muted. And the problem is if you have a mechanical mute like Alex, or, we can't tell whose mic is unmuted when there's strange noise coming in because it doesn't show it. So since they're not ever muted in Zoom, we can't tell whose microphone is feeding stuff in and not.
Yeah, I try to keep almost everything I do in hardware so that my software just turns on. Like I just jump into Teams or Meet or whatever, and I don't have to figure out any of the goofy ideas that they had about doing what they're doing. And I just have, this is my interface, and that's it. And so my system is completely separated from that, and I do that pretty intentionally.
The other thing I might mention is that when you don't mute, when you mute with the software in Zoom, its noise removal gets freaked out if you're mechanically muting going in, because it uses that period of time when you're not speaking, but muted to determine how to remove the noise from your particular audio chain. And if you are muting everything coming into Zoom, it doesn't see that noise until you've unmuted, and by then it's too late.
And because I have a MixPre with NoiseAssist, I don't think about that as much. Next question.
Next question comes from John Fisher in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. In your experience, how much continuous use does it take for a Sony ZV-E10 to overheat?
Well, I do try to leave it on a lot. I use it all day, so I just sit down. I don't really turn the cameras off very much. I turn them off at the end of the day, but during the day they stay on, and it doesn't take very long for it to do it when it's warm. So, and I can turn it on and off, and it seems to work fine. I know someone reached out to me and said, "Do you put it on the high heat?" Yes, I turned the high heat button on. Like it's not on the normal heat button, so it's on the high heat setting and still closing. So anyway, so that and that's the EV-E10. It hasn't been as bad. It has happened maybe once in a month. The EV-Z1, which is the $2,200 one, has shut off on average once or twice a day since I got it. And yesterday in the middle of a meeting. So I wasn't super excited about that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, the VMware Broadcom acquisition closed yesterday. Considering I've used VMware Fusion since version 3, I'm concerned about the future of the product. What other Mac OS virtualization solutions does the panel recommend?
The one that we always use was actually Parallels. I don't know. I haven't used one for a long time. I usually just buy PCs if I want PCs and use Macs if I want Macs. I don't virtualize much anymore. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm seeing this more and more, and I'm thinking, as soon as I read this question, I thought about Avid and the fact that they were just sold out from, they've been there forever, and they have this huge penetration in Hollywood. There's a lot of discussion about what will happen. I do think the life cycle of products is getting to a point where it's either increasing its success or it's in jeopardy. And I think there's less I'm just seeing too many of the old standbys, and VMware Broadcom acquisition may be one of the circumstances where some bigger bear comes in and absorbs them, and then it's a toss-up as to whether or not that's going to be good for them or they're eventually going to end up parted out.
Yeah, I've just stopped using them. I mean, I don't think I've used a virtualization in a decade at this point. I just buy the computers that they're built for. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Video Pencil Beta now supports USB cameras. I think this is fabulous, but in my testing, it can get the ATEM minis. I can't get the can get the A10 Minis working. Thoughts?
Maybe you can't see the A10 Mini. Go ahead,
maybe
Guy.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the beta as well, so shortly after the show, I'll go grab mine and can follow up on this. But I've seen this in the past with the A10 Minis where they say that they're UVC class compliant, but they do not show up everywhere that they're supposed to. So if you take a regular USB, like a Logitech or a Brio or something, and plug it in, that'll most likely work. So if you want to run some tests, but I'll run some tests as well. I have an A10 Mini right here, and my iPad is too far away for me to grab right now and try this.
Next question.
This one from the QR code again. It's from Chris in Sarasota, Florida. Curious if you have a list of video-related AI providers.
Go ahead, John.
The gold standard right now, futuretools.io. I did a real quick search on text to video, and there's over 2,000 listed right now.
The one that I've seen the most used is runway.ai. Is the one that most of the people I know that are playing with AI generated video are using. But I haven't seen the Future Tools. You said futuretools.ai? That's another.
Future Tools, just a list of all the different AIs that are out there. So if you do a search for text to video, there's 2,000 listed right now.
Yeah, runway.ai is the one that I've seen the most used. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I ran across a story just this morning about Stable Diffusion is now testing generative video. Says that you can generate up to 25 frames from a still image. Now, 25 frames isn't a lot, so you can't generate a whole scenario, but maybe it's just adding motion into a still frame that you add to it. But
a bunch of these have been
generative video. You know.
Yeah, a bunch of them are like having little smoke. It's like making GIFs that have little smoke coming out of the coffee cup or things kind of moving around to just give it a little bit of a flair to it. Go ahead, Bill.
Anybody else get the feeling that it would be a smaller list if you looked for video companies that were not investigating AI?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in some way or shape or form. But the ones that, again, and I think, again, I don't really look at these. I mean, maybe someday they're going to get to a point where they're doing final work. But I really think that the excitement here is to be able to rough things out. And not have to, take up a big team to rough things out and figure things out and work through them to get started. Like one of the things I was talking to someone about that they're using, they're not part of the Hollywood pipeline, but they said that they're finding a lot of success with getting ChatGPT to write a script for them for something short. They give it a bunch of pieces. They say, write the script, and then they sit down with a couple actors with their friends, and they sit there and they work through it and they make adjustments. And by the end of it, the script, the backbone of the script was created very, in seconds from ChatGPT. And then they spend a day talking through it and saying, oh, well, let's change this word to this and let's change that to that. And they said, when you get to the end of that, that's actually turns out to be a pretty good script. So again, using this as part of as I think Microsoft has it well defined as a co-pilot. I think that it works pretty well. And I think that's where we'll see it. But check out runway.ai. Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Galisteo, New Mexico. What generator do you recommend for residential backup? What's the change over time on the automatic ones? And what do folks in California with lots of power outages do?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I've had big ones, and now I have a little one. So this little 2200i is a recommended unit that it does a job for a couple fridges, and for home use, that was my main concern last year. We were out for a couple days. The nice thing about this one is it's got this eco throttle mode, so it's super quiet. So my neighbors were really upset with my big one. It was so loud. It was a diesel, and then you just reek of diesel fuel if you spill any of that on you for days. And so I like the little Hondas because you can parallel them. So you can take two of them and put them together, and you can also get an optional 5-gallon it's like an attachment that lets you run them both for an extended period of time, so you're not messing with it. A friend of mine has the larger Generac that just kicks on automatically. It was $20,000 to install into his home, and he piped it into the propane gas line, and that's the way to do it if you got $20,000. Otherwise, these are $1,199, and you can get two of them for $2,000 instead. And I bought mine used, so look, you'll find these on sets everywhere. You'll find them on trucks. It's a standard. So the little Honda red one's 2200i is the one I have.
Go ahead, Mark.
So you really want to go to a supplier that understands what you want to do first, because whether it's diesel or gas, natural gas, or propane is all going to matter on where you are and what supplies you have. The diesel ones are going to require you filling up extra tanks. You might need extra permits for that. You're going to have to exercise them once a week for 15 minutes, which makes a lot of noise, and your neighbors may not like that. And they're not instantaneous. So part of this whole deal is putting in the switch gear that's going to tie into your where you've got your fuse box and everything. And it's not going to just go automatically and fire because it doesn't know when to do that. So you're going to need some kind of battery in between the two.
Yeah, and then there's the feeling that you bought it and it doesn't. My parents put a generator into the house, and then they didn't need it for 6 years. And it was so funny. Like it just sat there. And then there was one day where I happened to be at home. I happened to be at my parents' house, and all the lights went out. And you heard this, and then they pop back up again. And the only thing my parents had to do, did it work? Did it work? And they were so excited that we lost power. So that I was like, yeah, it flickered for a second. It went down for 2 seconds, and then it came back up, and they were very excited. But you can fix that, of course, by using UPSs. So you can have and I wouldn't put UPSs on everything. It doesn't need it. So places that I've seen this done in Africa, usually there are a handful of lights. There are obviously all their computers and everything else that are sitting on a battery backup before the generator kicks in. So so those things don't flicker. So all the things that matter that are going to be sensitive to being turned on and off. And it's funny. In one of my friends in Africa had one. They had just car batteries, like all built. It was like a whole wall of car batteries that would run the show. The Generacs are the most for generators. The Generacs are the ones that we see the most in the United States. There's a lot of different things around the world, but the Generacs, and you can get this, as I said, standbys that are like 24 kilowatts, of power, 26 kilowatts that are in the raw generator is $6,000. But as Guy said, there's more than just buying the generator. You have to still tie it into the power pipeline. But what I do is I keep UPSs on my internet connections, on my computers, a couple lights, and then I'm still looking for a generator. And again, most of my neighbors now have them because of California. Because California is a dumpster fire when it comes to power. They have, and then the other one, of course, I have one neighbor that has the Tesla roof and 2 batteries and 2 Teslas. And it turns out that if you do a Christmas song, you have a lot of revenue to work with. Go ahead, Bill.
Man, people always say this, but it's weird. I lived in Arizona for most of my life, and I don't think I can count the number of power outages I had through Arizona Public Service on one hand. The power grid there was incredibly stable, and we didn't have much issue. I moved here to Southern California. It's exactly the same. I've been here for now 5 years, and I think maybe once for 20 minutes we've lost power. I just think this is localized. So generic thing is, what is your risk profile with the service you have in your area? Because even here, I mean, I know Alex has had all sorts of difficulties.
Well,
I'm
you
in
have Edison,
far
right?
Southern California, and I have not. I'm SDG&E, and you're a different provider. It is so random. So I would say pay attention to what your profile, and talk to people where you live, or if you're moving someplace, say, do you experience these? If so, it's a really good investment. If not, I bought a Honda generator, and I had one at my place in Scottsdale for 15 years. I sold it, and I had never opened the box.
Yeah, I'm sure that if I bought one right now, I would end up not ever needing it again. But
it's just
we went through
way.
a couple of years of just losing. I mean, just getting used to the fact that I'm not going to have power. Not having power for a couple of hours is one thing. Not having power for a couple of days is another thing. And it starts to really, it means that everything in your fridge went bad. Everything that, it's not a trivial problem. And Northern California can't get there together. Blank. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Cal Edison, I think, is a big problem in California, but I'm on Los Angeles DWP, which has been very reliable. The only time we've lost power is during a huge windstorms where it takes out a local transformer or something, or the trees blow into the power lines, and we'll take it out, and then it will be down. I take it back. There was a 5-hour loss the other day from a stupid Mylar balloon from a birthday party that shorted out the high voltage, and it caused the transformers to all blow. And then they have to go through the neighborhood and reset each individual transformer separately. It takes a long time. But what I was going to mention is that if you have a gasoline-powered backup generator, you have to exercise it because it will clog up and gum up unless you run it once a week or at least once a month to test it and get all the fluids running in it to make sure that it's not going to be frozen when you need to come to it 6 years later. And the gasoline does go bad. So if you have one that runs on propane or natural gas, is a better alternative, probably.
The other thing I found that if the chit-chatting with someone who was out there tearing up the street in front of me, I found out that I said, "What's the emergency? This looks pretty planned." And they're like, "Well, if it's planned, there's a lot of paperwork." so it's like, so they would call things emergencies, and then just take everybody's power out so they could make the change. It was just a lot faster than going through the 6 months of paperwork that they'd have to go through to plan it for a couple days. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I have one of the big UPSs with the alarm, so I know immediately when things go awry. The one thing that we didn't talk about, which Ken Jordan just brought up in the chat, is the larger batteries like the EcoFlow. So this is on my dream list. Actually, Black Friday. So we're seeing a lot of these even in rental houses. And John Idelson got one for free for his CPAP machine from the local, whatever it is in your county in Marin. Alex, they're giving away for free if you need to. His was like a $799 one. I believe it was something around this size, like the Delta 2. But these are handy because then you don't have to wake up your neighbors spinning up that loud thing. You can run it a fridge or your internet router and your server or whatever for a few hours, depending on the model that you get. But you could stack them and you recharge them with solar. So the green alternative is there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm totally fascinated with all the different power systems and things that you can build. I'm currently designing something with Canon for my truck with a few hundred watts of solar on the roof and giant 200 amp hour batteries, in the bed, stowed away, and then there's all the battery management stuff. I will also say that this statement, Tlaloc, it kind of feels like people in the Midwest always have tornadoes, and people in Florida always have hurricanes. It's like a weekly thing. And far be it from me to ever sound like I'm defending California, because I'm not. But in the 60 years I've lived here, and especially like the last 40 of just professionally, I've never had a day where I couldn't work because the power was out. And I know some people do, but it's not quite as common as the question makes it sound out.
I lose power. I lose power for at least a day every year. Like it's not, and that's a crazy. I mean, when I grew up,
you live in a bad neighborhood
in Pennsylvania. I know exactly, a rough neighborhood. When I'm in Pennsylvania, we lost power maybe once every 3 or 4 years. Like it was just, and we were living in the middle of nowhere. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael notes Fuzzy Feelings, the video animated thing that we show in the early part of the show, was edited on a MacBook Air. Without a fan, wouldn't the Air throttle easily with editing workflows like Final Cut Pro?
Good, Bill.
Absolutely not. Oddly enough, I have a MacBook Air in my voice booth, and I took it on remote shoots, and I've edited with Final Cut in it, and for some reason, the design of this thing does not overheat. I have had zero problems. Now, maybe if I was trying to run something way above its class, like mathematical simulations or something, it might get warm, but I've never had a problem with it at all. And in fact, when I went and did my little live insert from Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, I did that whole show insert from my MacBook Air, and it worked just fine, no problems.
They showed an Air on set as a photo op. Were they actually using it to edit or do this thing? Were they? I think it's a good product placement. But I was like, I have to admit, I kind of skipped over that because I saw it. And I was like, really? Like, did you really do that? Because that just.
I will say the M2.
The only reason you do that
is
I know, but the only reason you do that is for photo op. You would never, especially if you're Apple and you had all the access to all the hardware that you could possibly use. You're not going to use an Air. Like, this is absurd. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've told this story before in the past. I think earlier this week, possibly. We did a shoot about an edit house. This was years ago, and we shot all the B-roll. And the note that we got back from Apple was, "Why are we showing old hardware?"
Yeah,
and they sent us new hardware. We went back, we pulled their gear out of their racks, we put in new hardware, we reshot the B-roll. don't believe everything you see.
Next question.
Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma. Alex, you comment frequently on your stack of Mac Minis. What does each one do?
So I have. So the reason I do this is I build. I have presentations that I build that are very complicated, and I have to admit that I come from a world of. I realize that part of my particularness about presentations is that I used to do lots of presentations for Fortune 5 companies or Fortune 10 companies, and I'm just used to them running at a certain pace. Like I don't want to say, and now I'm going to jump out of my presentation and jump into an app that I want to show you, and I need everything to be in the state that they need to be in when I get to them. So if I'm going to come to show you something like an app, I want that app just waiting there, and I'm going to jump to it. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to jump back out of it, and I want that all to happen as fast as I'm talking because I'm usually in a presentation mode where I have 25 minutes to tell you what I need to tell you, and it's really what most people would take 40 minutes or 45 minutes to do, and I fix it by being able to snap to things. So I have 2 computers that are dedicated to applications, so I can jump from this application or that application. Both of them are in a steady state, so they're ready to be cut to at any point in time. I've got one that's a Zoom machine, so it just connects to Zoom. That's all it does. That way, things are fed into it, and it goes. I'm the Zoom connection. I don't have to worry about. I'm not screen sharing, so it doesn't matter. I'm just a video feed into that, and so it's a dumb unit that just goes into. It's just a Zoom appliance as far as I'm concerned. Then I have a presentation machine that holds Keynote. So the Keynote. Sometimes I use 2 presentation machines and 1 application machine. Sometimes so that switches back and forth. And so because the presentations are in different states, but I'm trying to get down to 1 presentation at a time. And the reason for that is that when I'm doing presentations, sometimes the video, the demonstrative pictures are keyed in front of me, and sometimes they're full screen. And I had a hard time getting both of those to happen at the same time. So that's what that is. And then I have one that's dedicated to Telestrator that's there. And so those are the main machinery that I use to make that actually work. And so that's why I have so many of them. And I don't use any kind of I don't use Apple's coherence, and I don't use anything else. Because I have 3 or 4 more monitors available to me than I have monitors. So these are all going into a Blackbird 8x8 matrix, and so I'm changing the state of the monitors based on the presentation or based on the show or based on the meeting that I'm in. So again, I know it sounds really complex. I've been doing this for 15 years, and it's not something that I just built. It's like something that I went, I need this one other thing, and I need this one other thing. And you get used to how they all work. I will, so it's not like it's this progressive, like I needed one more thing, because usually what happens is I got stuck somewhere. I got stuck in something that didn't look good or didn't sound good, or I was frustrated with in a presentation, and I just added more hardware to make that stuckness go away. And so that's how you end up with all this stuff, that's around. And then I'm almost at the state. Usually what happens is it's all nice and clean, and I built a drawing for it, and then it slowly becomes a hive, and we're in the hive mode right now. So I've got wires everywhere. So this week, it's my time, right after noon, I'm tearing this thing apart. So tomorrow I'll probably just be on a camera because I'll spend a couple days kind of rebuilding the system. But I'm getting ready in December to probably invest a fair amount in building the space up a little bit more as I get ready for a lot of big presentations and events and speaking engagements. I'm probably not going to go back to speaking in person again. Like I did that this year as an experiment at NAB and a couple other places, and I found it to be just horrible. And so I'm not going to do that again. It's just mostly that I have a big system that's set up. I've got a really good studio, and then I have to go and plug my computer into an Extron. I'm going and presenting in trash. Like I literally feel like I'm knee deep in trash when I'm going to speak in front of people. And so if people won't let me come in over Zoom, I'm not going to go. Like I'm just not going to be there. I've kind of just decided. I tried to back away from that. Last year was my experiment, and the experiment's over. It's a failure. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's a slow evolution. You don't just go out one day, throw down the credit card, and buy 6 computers and 20 monitors, and it's like, I really need one. And I agree about the idea of I can't imagine you going and doing an in-person talk.
Yeah, I did it. So bad. Like it's just, it's so like you just feel like you're halfway through the presentation. You're like, this is just so like a fraction of what I'm capable of doing, and I just feel like it's not serving anybody to do that. Like it's just for me, there's definitely people that it's better because they don't have a system at home to do it, and they don't have a camera, and they don't have internet. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know why but if you're if you're doing this regularly, you should build up the system, and then more organizations should allow us to just come in remotely. Because it's so much better experience. so anyway, next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Is circuit bending in music still being used, or is it used in anything anymore?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's a lot harder now. I mean, I used to do circuit bending when we were using a Moog, modular 5000 back in the 70s, when you could get creative and change out pots and change capacitors. These days, with everything being surface mount electronically, and even changing a pot is quite difficult because all the pots on a musical instrument are usually soldered to a single motherboard, and they're wave soldered, and in order to get the board out to change something, you got to undo 500 different screw connections, and it's just a big pain. So it's a lot tougher to do these days. A lot easier to modify the algorithms in a in a digital synthesizer than it is to actually go in and hack the analog components to change the sound of a particular analog synth, etc.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez, Sacramento, California. Has anyone been able to use an iPad in place of a Wacom One? The Wacom One is often out of sync in regard to pen and screen position. How can I get the video into the iPad to tellustrate over it?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you're going to want to take a look at the Video Pencil app. That'll allow you to get the video in. Currently, it's via NDI, but as there was an earlier question, you could just use a USB box, a little, $20. They range in price, but that's how you would get the video in, and then that way you can tellustrate over it. Myself, I have the larger Wacom, and it's Wacom, not Wacom, not any other thing, but
like
I use
water.
it with Mimo Live with the free painter layer. So that's my solution because it's very fluid. The trick is to put it at 60 frames per second for the project, and that way it's super smooth ink.
Yeah, I have no issue with sync. I have a Wacom One is what I use, and I have zero registration or sync issues with it. And I've been using some version of a Wacom to do what I'm doing now for 15 years. So and I've not had that problem. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Viera, Florida. Can anyone recommend a behind-the-head neckband style headset with a boom mic for Zoom? Thanks.
DPA 4066 or a Countryman H6, and then the one that's not that you can play with. This is the Kimura one that I'm testing right now. I'm still on the fence on it. There's just if you're good at using it, it will work. It's not as good as the Countryman or the DPA, and it has a lot of handling noise. So you just have to be very conscious to it. And I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm going to keep it or not. Next question.
Matthew in Oakland says, is there a case for streaming in 4K?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, on this show, I've seen where somebody would open up a large screen share when we were, particularly the remotes band was showing all the levels of tracks, and we just had it in HD, and I was just like, oh my gosh, we could be pushing this out in 4K. So for archive purposes, we would have been able to read every single track name, and it would have been pixel perfect. So that's an example where you would want the additional resolution. For day-to-day, I mean, it's a lot of load. You're looking at 24 megs a second to push up in 4K because it's just so much heavier. It's basically 4 1080s. So unless you have a use case, it looks pretty beautiful on a nice TV, but HDR could look even better depending on the pipeline that you have it set up if you're doing HLS or what your workflow looks like. So it's kind of there's use cases for both resolution versus pixel quality.
And we're doing both here over next year. So we'll be doing HDR 5.1 4K. And the reason for that, again, is when we show stuff, we're going to be able to show things at a much higher resolution, as Guy talked about, in limited areas. So we're going to have to figure out exactly, and again, we're experimenting with it. 4K 85-inch screen TVs are now below $1,000. So the thing is that the idea that people aren't going to have something to watch it over the next 2 or 3 years, you won't be able to buy a 1080p TV over 65 inches for much longer. They're just, what happens is they stop manufacturing them. They just, because it doesn't make sense to run them anymore. And so we are moving towards 4K. Doing 4K on a daily basis, the reason we're looking at doing it is because doing it on a daily basis means that we get to keep on practicing so that when it is useful, we are able to take advantage of that. And I will say that the thing that we keep on coming back to is how people feel. And when you see the higher resolution, they will not notice. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what people notice or not. People have to stop saying that. I keep on, it's like in the fire, in Man on Fire, where he goes, people keep on saying, I'm a professional. I get tired of hearing that. The thing that I hate hearing, and I'm usually hold my tongue, is people won't notice. It doesn't matter whether they notice or not. It's actually more powerful that they don't notice it. And that, Apple lives in a world where people don't notice the things that they're doing. That lower brain effect that you have on people by creating higher frame rate, higher resolution, higher quality, all those things in their subconscious, which is way more powerful than their conscious, it moves you up a notch, pushes it forward. So it just doesn't matter what people notice or not. It's what they feel, and we have, there's, Dolby and other people do a lot of research on this. And that's why I got into it, is because I was doing some stuff there. And that what they feel is so much more important than what they think, and when it comes to the kind of content you build, one of the reasons we're doing it is we are out here to do damage to the idea that you can't build events that are spread out all over the world. And by the end of next year, at the rate that we're going, if we're able to continue the pace that we're doing this at, we're going to get to a point where we embarrass the rest of broadcast. This is, if you look at the quality of the frames right now and think about the Zoom participants that are coming into broadcast right now, we're already pretty close to embarrassing them because their stuff looks horrible. And we're just going to keep stretching that out. And then we're going to, use that as a leverage point to keep on pushing people forward. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has our last one. I love this question. YouTube complained that the MSG Sphere sound system didn't have, quote, enough distortion. How could they resolve that? And he's got a link to it.
I don't know. I don't know how they resolve having too much. You got to add more dirt.
More stomp.
You got to add more dirt to it. More. It doesn't got no dirt. It's not dirty enough. Go ahead, Courtney.
Let's add an electro-optical isolator compressor into their line before it feeds the main sound system to add noise distortion back in. But I think the problem they're complaining about is because that system has a bunch of thousands and thousands of little tiny speakers rather than linear arrays of really big and loud speakers. They don't feel that it has enough visceral impact to affect the crowd so that each person out in the crowd is hearing a nicely balanced audio mix rather than something that is smashing them in the face.
Good, Chris.
U2 has a long history of, wanting to be cool and rock and roll. And I think this is probably somebody misquoting something. I don't think this is right. Their sound systems are great. They've traveled with great sound systems. It's not like, they're playing through some crappy PV amp.
Thanks to the panelists for being here for 2 hours. I'm really enjoying the 2-hour session of Q&A, I have to say. It's very relaxing. So for me. So thanks to the panelists for playing along with us, and great panels on this week. So it's really fantastic. And thanks to the producers for asking all the questions. We got to the end of the hour, a little over, and in that vein, thanks to the back end team that stayed with us a little longer. I know that we're running a little over time, but we have this incredible team that's putting together. We had dev sessions yesterday. We have meetings. I'm planning almost every day to figure out what we're going to do for the show. And then we have, of course, the team that's actually cutting the show. So it's incredible. Reminder that Thanksgiving is tomorrow in the United States. Now, we will still be here because we don't miss days. so you can still expect to see office hours on Thursday morning. We'll be talking. So we'll see you all then. We traveled 104,000 miles today. That's 167,000 kilometers. And that is more than 824 million bananas for scale. Let's jump into after hours. Thanks.
hey, we're a nonprofit. Should we make Sam Altman an offer?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I promise that our board will not be crazy. I promise.
We do it in all office hours stock, which doesn't exist.
No, give him the same amount of equity that he has in OpenAI, which is zero.
Exactly.
Zero.
Exactly. It won't be AI. We'll just have a lot of opinions for him. Like we'll just, like that's what you need is just AI opinions. That's it. Where's the AI where it just goes, that's a dumb question. Like, why are you asking me that? Like that.
Yeah, that's
AI
surely
with
what
an
he wants
attitude.
is more separate people with separate opinions.
Or just starts
life.
you asking a question and just goes, I can't believe you asked that again. Okay, here it is. All right. So I see it.
See you all tomorrow.